Where is the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs? And what if there were two killer asteroids? One unspecified day, 66 million years ago, the impact of a large asteroid made our Earth, a planet so remarkably suitable for life, a dark and inhospitable place, hostile to most living things. It became night and winter for a very long time, and when the first rays of sunlight managed to filter through again, they illuminated vast, uninhabited plains, forestless and ash-covered, and oceans essentially devoid of life. In that desolation, fungi and algae shared their existence with a few other living things, such as small mammals and ferns. Over millions of years, things improved. The climate turned to differentiation and new species evolved, populating the Earth once again. And it is probably because of that asteroid and the devastation it brought to the planet millions of years ago that you are standing in front of a screen today reading what is basically our story. But something doesn't add up. How could such an event have left no trace? So much so that it was ascertained by the scientific community only a few years ago. To understand this, let's start with another famous example of an impact crater. Who doesn't know Meteor Crater, a very famous tourist attraction on the way to the Grand Canyon in Arizona? Formed just 49,000 years ago by the fall of a 40-meter diameter asteroid, it is now the icon of all the large impact craters that are still visible on Earth's surface. The Big Hole is about 1,200 meters wide and 170 meters deep, and it is one of the few craters that can show itself with a relatively intact structure. In fact, most of Earth's other craters are so eroded that only a trained eye can distinguish them as such. And among them, there is even one that, although huge and very famous, is completely inaccessible to the human eye, lost as it is between land and sea and buried under hundreds of meters of debris. Yes, we are indeed talking about the Chicxulub crater, named after a small town that now stands near its center. That is the footprint left on Earth by the asteroid that ended the era of the giant reptiles. But what is the reason for this difference between the two events? On the one hand, we have a small 40-meter rock that is now buried tens of meters below the cavity and has left us such a monument as Meteor Crater as a gift. And on the other hand, we have an asteroid as large as 12 kilometers in diameter, comparable in size to Deimos, a satellite of Mars, that has rocked half the world but has left almost no trace of itself. One would then have to ask, but where on Earth did that huge killer asteroid disappear to? And where is the scar that such a catastrophic impact should have left on the ground? To answer these questions, it is necessary to take several steps back, to precisely a day in late spring 66 million years ago, when a cosmic projectile came from the northeast and treacherously struck the Yucatan coast with an impact angle of about 50 degrees, the worst condition that could have occurred, as this inclination is considered the most efficient for an impacting body in digging into the ground and maximizing the destructive effects. None of us would have wanted to be there at that time, but we would arrive much later, and Earth was then a very different planet. First, because of the arrangement of the continents. India was still a large island drifting between Africa and Antarctica, pushed by tectonic forces towards the Asian subcontinent, where millions of years later it would go to form the Himalayan chain. Europe and the entire Mediterranean area were still completely submerged, and the Atlantic Ocean stood as a narrow arm of the sea between South America and Africa, two continents that had been drifting apart from each other for only a few million years. So too was the entire region of Central America and the central part of North America still submerged. Moreover, the whole planet was inhabited by dangerous, gigantic, and savage creatures, from which it would have been better to keep away. A totally alien planet in the eyes of us 21st century naked apes. But something, fortunately for us, was about to change things forever. But let us return to the chronicle of that fateful day. In the sky, evening after evening, a celestial body became visible, becoming brighter and brighter as time passed. The behemoths, all intent on grazing and hunting, probably did not ask questions, nor could they have known that it was an asteroid nearly 10 kilometers in diameter headed towards their planet. The entry of this cosmic mountain into the atmosphere produced a colossal shockwave, with a bang so loud that millions of birds and pterosaurs soared across the globe and scared even the bravest T-Rex to death. Then the great space rock reached the ground at a speed estimated at 20 kilometers per second. vaporizing the coastal waters of the Yucatan Peninsula, which were 100 to 1,200 meters deep at that point. According to simulations and mathematical models carried out in recent years, the impact led to the formation of a crater 180 kilometers in diameter, excavated to a depth of 20 kilometers. All of this hurled about 25 trillion tons of debris into the atmosphere, lifted up to a height of 30 kilometers. Hang on a sec, guys, before we continue. Be sure to join the Insane Curiosity channel. Click on the bell. You will help us to make products of even higher quality. At the rim of the newly formed crater, a crown of lava higher than the Himalayan chain rose up and then collapsed within just 3 minutes, leaving a circular mountain range at the bottom to mark the perimeter of the cavity. Similarly, in the center of the crater, a rocky peak sputtered upward and then crashed back down into the ground, with an effect similar to throwing a sugar cube into a cup of coffee. 10 minutes later, the rock stabilized and stopped behaving as if they were a fluid mass. The impact also caused earthquakes of unspeakable power and devastating tsunamis, the movement of water away from and then back into the crater, and the related seismic activity generated waves up to 1,500 meters high that expanded in ever-widening circles, disrupting water masses across the planet and carrying sediment as far as 6,000 kilometers away. The energy produced was equal to that of 1 billion atomic bombs, similar to the one dropped on Hiroshima. An infinite amount of incandescent material belonging to both the asteroid and the seafloor was ejected beyond the atmosphere in a matter of moments, only to fall back to Earth thousands of kilometers away. Debris was so hot that it ignited whatever it encountered in its fall towards the ground. On impact, the asteroid, which was probably a low-density carbonaceous chondrite, was instantly vaporized. And this is the first answer as to why, unlike the cosmic Meteor Crater rock, which was of ferrous composition, the Yucatan killer asteroid was completely lost. A huge cone of liquefied rock then rose into the air, producing a giant hailstorm of small, glassy fragments, the tektites that would have covered much of the Western Hemisphere. Some of this material may have also overcome Earth's gravitational pull, then dispersing throughout the solar system. And it is not far-fetched to think that some of these fragments perhaps carry terrestrial bacteria with them, making the asteroid that wiped out much of the life on Earth an indirect distributor of life on other worlds far from our own. About 20 minutes after the impact, the water returned to cover the crater, dragging so much debris with it that it sealed the cavity into a kind of sarcophagus that hid it from the world until a few decades ago. And that's the second answer to the initial question. The Chicxulub crater formed mostly in a marine environment, and within not even half an hour of the impact, it was covered by a layer of sediment up to 600 meters thick. The rest is history. The Earth quickly became an inferno. Glowing dust enveloped much of the atmosphere, causing fires first in the Western Hemisphere and later in the Indian forest thousands of miles away from Yucatan. The fires carbonized about 70% of all forest existing at the time. For months, perhaps years, dust in the atmosphere along with soot from the fires prevented the sun's rays from filtering through. Photosynthesis process came to an almost complete halt, resulting in the demise of most plants and causing a net reduction of oxygen in the air. And at this point, it is needless to mention that the devastation for living creatures, even thousands of miles away, was cruel and without remedy. But to make matters worse, that happened on that inauspicious day, there was more. Curiously enough, in fact, the samples collected during geological prospecting, hardly a trace of sulfur was found, a mineral, on the other hand, very much present in the rocks around the crater. This seems to confirm the theory that the impact released hundreds of billions of tons of sulfur into the atmosphere, which spread from the pulverized rock on the seafloor into the atmosphere, where it may have caused a kind of sulfuric acid fog capable of partially obscuring sunlight for decades, causing global average temperatures to drop by more than 16 degrees, and causing a very long winter. Or it could have created a series of very powerful acid rain that can drastically alter ocean balances. In either case, the consequences for life on the planet were devastating. In short, worse could not come to Earth and its creatures. Not only did the killer asteroid fall at just the right size and angle to do real harm, but it also fell in a region where a highly toxic substance like sulfur abounded in the rock substrate. Poor innocent dinosaurs, one would say. But the mystery of those far-off days has not yet been fully unraveled. Indeed, there are not a few scientists who still continue to ask this question. How is it possible that the Chicxulub impact, however violent, was so destructive to the entire planet. Think of all the proportions between the Earth and that cursed asteroid. Our planet, after all, is something 1,000 times larger in diameter. Are we really sure that mountain was enough to put it into the sword? Well, the doubt is there, and it doesn't seem entirely unfounded, especially since traces have been found buried under layers of sand along the West African coast that would indicate that the huge asteroid may not have been the only one to crash into Earth that very sad day. Researchers, in fact, recently discovered what may be a crater about 8.5 kilometers wide, located 400 kilometers off the coast of Guyana. The crater, named Nadir after the nearby submarine volcano, appears to be the imprint left by the impact of a space rock at least 400 meters wide, and it too may have formed 66 million years ago at the same time as the Chicxulub crater. The object that created the Nadir crater was considerably smaller than the Chicxulub asteroid, so its effects were probably smaller in magnitude. But if the hypothesis is confirmed, the impact of a second meteorite in rapid succession may have dealt a double blow to the planet, which is already in the process of global catastrophe. One possible hypothesized scenario sees the two asteroids coming from a single original body, which then split into two parts before colliding with Earth's atmosphere and impacting the ground, ending up nearly 5,500 kilometers apart. According to the team's estimates, the collision may then have released energy equivalent to that of 5,000 megatons of TNT, almost instantly vaporizing the water and seafloor layers below. Within minutes, the seafloor was hurled upward, again creating a central peak before collapsing back on itself. The end result was probably a mound with a basin-like depression in the center, exactly what scientists believe they have identified beneath the surface layers of the West African coast. Further analysis will be needed to confirm the assumed age and identity of the crater and its possible connection to the Chicxulub event, but scientists are already cautiously excited about the potential new impact site. Perhaps the story of the extinction of life in the Cretaceous is yet to be written. Who knows?